Thank you so much once again, Shantanu, for joining us today in our series of conversation with leaders.
It's my pleasure. Yeah.
No, it is mine. I don't think I have been so excited for any other conversation because this one is all about learning, right? And I see that the entire career span that you have
Yeah.
is so focused in one area. And of course, as you know, as part of HR as a function, it's never limited to one thing because everything is interconnected, right?
Correct.
But it's so dedicated to one single space, and that has got me very excited because I want to deep dive into what exactly learning, means, has meant, has evolved, and how it is going to be in years to come. So
Yeah.
thank you once again.
Sure. Yeah.
for for everyone's sake who will be watching this video, I just want to say that we have Shantanu Bhattacharya here with over 20 years of experience across different sectors and industries, and of course global experience, not just with your education but also the kind of companies that you have been part of, Shantanu.
Yeah.
And uh, today with you and on gender, of course, we mainly speak around topics related to gender and inclusion.
Mhm.
But today we are going to combine gender, learning, and inclusion and how it is going to be for workplaces.
Sure. Sure.
Great. My first question to you, Shantanu, is if we look at the past 2 decades or
Mhm.
past 1 decade, right? How exactly would you say has learning evolved? Because all of us see how technology is evolving, right? But in the workplaces scenario, nobody understands it until and unless they're part of these processes internally.
Mhm.
How has it evolved?
I think you've really hit on the crux of it, technology. But ultimately, um, technology is a medium. It's how you use it. It's the tool, right?
Hmm.
What really has evolved over the last couple of decades since I started working is, I think, the mindset of the people, the way people have accepted that learning is going to be, that change. When I started in my career, and I'm really dating myself here, when I completed my master's and I joined my first job, I really hadn't handled the computer, right? Even in my first job, after starting to work, I used my first computer and a very rudimentary version of Word, with I think the RAM was 116 GB or something like that of that computer. It was, yeah, I was like so excited because, oh my God, I'd seen things only in the movies. I was actually handling this weird thing which people called a mouse, right? So I was also learning. For me, that was like a remarkable thing. But the actual learning was still happening in the classrooms, right?
Mhm.
That's what continued. So the technology bit has always kind of uh, run ahead of the learning curve here for the longest time. And that is something that is now changing because now, finally, over the last decade or the last few years, and of course, as an accelerated growth, that learning is now driving the kind of technology being created. The learning requirement is driving.
Right.
So it's a fairly radical sort of shift when you come to think of it, because earlier we used to use, you have a computer, how can you use it in learning? And now we have a learning requirement. What can we do with technology to fulfill that requirement? Because hey, the requirement is more important than what technology has,
Right.
right? So this is it's an important sort of change, and the reason it's important is that learning is now engendering
Hmm.
innovation, right? It is not following innovation, it is actually driving and engendering innovation. And this has got a huge impact on every industry, because it also works both ways. The moment there is innovation and somebody takes that ball and runs with it, to use a very American metaphor, uh, then other companies, other organizations, even other educational institutions, they feel the need to follow, because they don't want to be left behind. And
Right.
that's how, with greater adoption, is happening. And something like a black swan event like this COVID, the coronavirus, is going to do more for learning technology and the way people learn than anything that has happened in the last 2 decades. So whatever we have seen the last 2 decades will be eclipsed, or will be the equivalent impact would have happened in the 6 months and the next 6 months in the area of learning as well. So maybe this is a force fit. I'm not sure. We will discuss it as we go forward about the pros and cons of this. Might not always be. As a technology enthusiast, my first reaction is excitement, and then as a learning professional, as an instructional designer, I sometimes pause and start thinking about the other sides also as I watch people actually actually do this in front of me. So
Right. Right. But while technology plays a very important role, right? And correct me if I'm wrong, Shantanu, but technology is still the medium, right?
correct.
The aspects that we have to learn, like let's look at 20 years ago when attrition and retention were not the main pointers, or even the KRAs or KPIs that organizations were tracking. And that is why the LDPs and the MDPs were not in picture. It's only when I think somewhere this thought process started that it's better to retain employees and help them grow further in the organization with the concept of succession planning, instead of not thinking about their growth as an individual and as a professional, and then having them leave the organization and then hiring new talent. And that is the result. I mean, if I look at my father's generation, they never received such kind of internal trainings, and all these development programs were never something that they were part of. Yes, there were orientations, but nothing so structured as what we see in the past decades. Right. And then learning, and that's all knowledge based, right? That's all knowledge and skill based. Then came learning around behavior.
Right.
And I still remember that after a manufacturing stint of almost 15-20 years, when we had to shift to Philippines, and my father from a complete rural manufacturing hardcore background, male driven industry, here he was part of a country where 90% of the population and labor force is women. And for him that was another form of learning, that okay, now I have to change the way I behave and I talk and I communicate, and my body language and everything. So while technology is the medium here, these components, what are the trends that you have seen? Because for me, these are the observations that, as a practitioner, that I have seen from a distance. But because you have been part of the battleground, right? How has this evolved? And considering behavior, knowledge, gender inclusion, other kinds of diversity activities, what is the forefront that we are standing or sitting on right now?
There are it's an interesting point when you talk about the evolution of the organization rather than just technology, and I'll tell you the changes I have seen majorly over the last. First is that the nature, as you mentioned, the nature of the workforce is changing, right? The whole concept of the job is becoming more fungible in a way, right? People, what we used to call the steadiness of a job is constantly reducing,
right?
The security, as the generation that you talked about, your father, my father, security that used to be, if you have a job like this, then you're secure, you're set for life. That thing has, it's getting eroded day by day, in many industries. The second thing that is happening is that the demographics of the workforce is changing, which means that there were certain jobs, for example, earlier where, which had a very, very focused and almost predictable demography. Right. That it would be, okay, if it is picking of tea leaves, it will be women who are going to do that, right? If it is going to be, polishing of diamonds, it is going to be adolescents between like 18, 16 and 20.
And we have justifications for these.
And there's various justifications for this. But that is no longer holding true. And for a couple of reasons. One is that there's more awareness and more people are getting into different sort of streams, other than our steady arts, commerce, science, engineering, doctor kind of streams. So there are different kind of work that's coming in, and people are suddenly realizing, hey, I don't need to stick to this demographic to get my work done. There might be a better way to do this. Secondly, of course, there is more regulation and awareness, right? So when we say more and more organizations, at least, ostensibly, and especially in the what I would call the formal sort of sector, they are either getting more aware of diversity and inclusion, and B, or B, are being forced to incorporate, at least in the beginning, right?
Yes.
Because of various regulations. Otherwise, or either because of regulation or because of reputation
Right.
reasons. Right? So now when you have a mixed demography of people, you're learning the whole concept of what you're going to teach goes into a corresponding change, right? And what is that change? Now your learning has to be more inclusive in
Yes.
nature. The example, if you take a simple thing like you mentioned management training and leadership training. If you're management training, a big part of management training is training through the help of case studies, right?
Right.
The very nature of the cases have changed nowadays. If you've attended, I recently attended a very fairly comprehensive 12-day management training in my last job, which was conducted by the Ross School of Business, Michigan University. Some of the teachers were using the older case studies, but most of them were being forced to use newer case studies because the students themselves were saying that, hey, this is not relevant anymore.
Right.
All right, using the same case studies to teach the fortune at the bottom of the pyramid is not relevant anymore because the bottom of the pyramid has changed.
True.
Right,
True.
in a way. So it's catching up, the whole thing of catch up. So then what do you teach? How do you teach it? Changes. For me, for example, the MDP and LDP, what is the basic difference between an MDP and LDP? It's behavioral, right? You
Yeah.
teach management techniques in one and you teach leadership techniques. What is the difference between a management study and the leadership training? The difference is inchoate, it's behavioral in nature.
Yeah.
Right? So that is another aspect that has come in. Now there are so many of these changes working in parallel, right? That the only way you can actually bring them together into some sort of a coherent plan are with two things. One is the medium, as we discussed, technology, and the other one, which we constantly keep forgetting about, is design.
Yeah.
Right? And the reason I mentioned this is because I attend conferences, some of these, I speak at some of them, and I read some interviews, and some of which I think Ritu also sent me. People talk about 100 things in learning, but they don't talk about the design of learning.
Yes.
Right? Because you might have the best content in the world, you might have the best intentions in the world, you might be the best teacher in the world, but the only way all of this is going to come together into an effective with an effective measurable goal at the end is if you design it very well. Which is why I think instructional design is the kind of superset and everything else is a subset of it. Technology is a subset. Now instructional design takes, okay, these are the technology options, so this is how I will teach, and because these are the options, I will follow this mode or I'll follow this theory, and I'll start with this and I'll do this. All of them have an impact, and only if they all mesh together in a sort of coherent sort of whole will the learning really be effective and inclusive.
That's true. I was just taking notes when you were saying two phrases really struck me. What you said about why change is becoming acceptable, regulations and reputation, two R's very crucial here. And when learning becomes inclusive, because as organizations are becoming inclusive, there's no other way but for learning also to evolve like that. But the challenge remains here, Shantanu, right? And this is something that we have also seen. I mean, from 6 years ago, an entity like us teaching concepts on workplace sexual harassment to companies. And there's a constant switch and cycle that we have gone through also, from classroom sessions, then converting them into e-modules, from e-modules, then identifying that videos work or animation works, or getting these theatrical recordings work. and now finally arriving at completely going back to the drawing board and creating micro-based learning solutions. So what is making it challenging is, and that's my question to you, is what are learning solutions or learning tactics when we think about for organization and for individuals, keeping in mind that we are talking about inclusive teams. Is it more challenging to design learning concepts on knowledge and skill compared to behavioral solutions? Because you said the thing about from MTP to LDP, right? The challenge is the behavioral part. Uh, how should one? Is it more challenging to design one with compared to the other? And how should we go about navigating it?
Uh, in short, the challenges are different, right?
Okay, but there's no comparison. There's no.
There is. I'll come to it. I'll tell you why it is different from a technology learning design perspective, from technology perspective, where this is the world I'm from. I'm an e-learning learning technology management guy. From a technology perspective, the challenge is very clear. It is much easier technologically to teach knowledge and skills than to teach behavior.
Right. With you on this. Yes.
It's a major challenge to teach behavior. And that is where, because it was a challenge, this is one of the areas where the learning requirement is driving technology as well. Okay. So how is this happening? Is that the technology need not be, the technology need not have been created specifically for learning, but learning is trying to incorporate other areas of technology into it for its own needs. Take the example of artificial intelligence and machine learning or deep learning, whatever you call it. Because teaching behavior in an online format is so difficult, why is it? If you think about it, there is one basic difference between an instructor-led format and a classroom format. And what is that difference? The difference is instant, customized feedback.
Yes.
Right? So if you were, for example, teaching me something right now on video, right? It's the most acceptable non-classroom sort of option right now.
Yes.
So if you were teaching me, like I used to teach at one time, I used to teach people how to clear interviews, group discussions and interviews for the IIMs. That was my first job. I used to train people for the CAT examinations.
Wow. Okay.
So what was my role? Because people were doing interview, my role was to give immediate customized feedback. Hey, don't fold your arms like this because it shows a defensive attitude, right? Don't make eye contact, right? If you spread out your arms too much, you'll look pompous. So work in that, all these kind of things. Or don't use this word. I've noticed that you always tend to use like before every second word. Now, this kind of feedback you can't give through e-learning, pure e-learning, right? So then people started thinking, like, okay, is it not possible to do behavioral? And remember, we are talking about it's been evolved. Okay, right now we don't have bandwidth problems, but even till 5 years back, or even today, in many parts of India, I mean, we are all very happy with Zoom and Google Meet, but there are parts of India who won't be able to access Zoom and Google Meet because of bandwidth.
Absolutely. That's why the schools e-learning is not working.
Yeah, exactly. So how do we? So then people started thinking that, okay, can I use AI to mimic that that feedback process?
Right.
And it started. So now what, with through the help of AI and machine learning, a machine can actually give you feedback now even on the tone of your voice.
Yes.
Right. I'm not saying it's very common yet, but it is happening, and it will happen more and more. So a technology that was built for something entirely different is now is going to be used, or is being used by the learning and development community for its own requirements. And remember, the requirements is not just for L&D, it's for the business.
Yes.
Now anything that we do as part of learning and development, I call myself an accidental HR, but since I am an HR, the fact is that our primary fealty, if I may call it, is towards business results. If I'm working in an organization, it's towards business results. So business circumstances demand that I be able to provide solutions that can give the kind of results the business wants under whatever constraints we might be in. Right now, the constraint is that we can't have classroom sessions.
Yes.
Having said that, are we in a place where we can say that we will completely be able to replace behavioral training through e-learning? I don't think we are there. I don't think we even need to 100%, or we will be able to, right? And part of this, but what is, before I go on to that, but what is happening is that because we are managing to do bits and pieces of behavioral training also in an online technology based format, it is increasing the span of people who can get access to learning, which is also inclusive in its own, by its own nature, right? And right now, and I'm not just talking about a corporate, think of a MOOC like Udemy, for example, or Khan Academy. They are also becoming better and better and better at the kind of offerings that they're doing. And at some point, prices are also going to go down. In some cases, also courses are free, but prices go down. Look at the kind of inclusion that has made, or the kind of the amount of inclusion that has contributed to. And then you'll realize why I believe so much in technology, because nothing else, no matter how many organizations you go and teach people on, they are still physical organizations. Your span will be that organization.
True.
But the Udemy, right? Anybody, woman, man, transgender, homosexual, anybody, it doesn't matter. It is just available to kids.
Yes.
Right? It's just available to everybody. Right? There are certain challenges in countries like India. Language is a challenge, etc. But these will be handled, and ultimately AI will handle language, because AI is automatically translating courses now in different languages. Right? And this is where we need to be able to understand why the technology bit is important. But coming back to your earlier, point of the whole leadership, currently, if you ask me, I think there is still some ways to go in terms of being that. And part of this has, I've started realizing after watching my daughter attend her classes on Zoom, on Google Meet every day. The PTA association, this is an interesting story. The PTA, asked us, we have this WhatsApp group, right? Parents WhatsApp group, the most stress-inducing thing ever in our lives. So the parents WhatsApp group, PTA said that the school has asked for feedback on how are the classes going on Zoom and all. I didn't respond to that because I don't respond, or neither did my wife. But most of the parents were effusive in their praise, effusive. Right? Their teachers are working so hard. It is so good. It's brilliant that this is happening. These classes are, they're learning so much. And I was thinking, what is wrong with this? I mean, because I can see my daughter, it started off, it was a new thing. Everybody was excited. All the kids had their videos on. They were talking. That lasted 3 days. Today, not a single child in my daughter's class has their video on. The only talking head, the only video is teachers, right? And one or two children who the others hate anyway, because they're the officious ones who are always, talking to the teacher. But not a single class have I seen more than one or two at a time. Even those kids, switch it off at the time. So what is happening? Are they learning? I don't know, because frankly, for all the great things that we are listening, and this same thing will be happening in corporate things also. The company I used to work on last, they conducted 50 webinars in a month and a half. 50 webinars they conducted, and massive, WhatsApp groups and massive self-congratulations saying, wow, we are doing so good, learning latitudes, all these webinars. I don't know whether they have even taken a feedback to saying that whether people actually learned something or they attended because it was a company
True.
thing.
True.
Till the time we measure, we ask this question to the actual users, end users, both in corporate and in schools, colleges. This is too early for us to proclaim, hey, Zoom teaching is a success. It's a success in the sense that it works, as in you can
For
do this.
accessibility, yes, it
Yes.
works, but effectiveness is a different
We
thing
don't know yet.
altogether.
We don't know. We'll have to have at least 3 to 4 years of this thing happening for us to gather enough sort of workable data or even anecdotal data to
But
really.
who is collecting, Shantanu? Nobody is
I don't know.
collecting. I mean, we don't know.
Nobody is. I mean, I'm sure. I hope some people. I hope the Josh Bersin academies of the world or ATDs and all are collecting this data. I'm not. I don't have means of collecting it. Zoom doesn't, because as long as people are using it, they're going to collect effectiveness. They're collecting number of people on their platform, right? Google isn't. The teachers should be collecting. How will they do that unless they're trained to collect that data? The
No,
schools
that's
should be
true.
collecting it. The colleges should be. They are not trained how to collect the data. They are struggling. They are struggling to create PowerPoints.
No, that's true. And I had a different question, but because you ended this one on this note, I'm going to park the other one for a while. It's very, so sorry about that.
No problem.
It's it's very important, right? That somewhere in this whole transition of either you say the teachers or you say the HR function or companies, somewhere the focus is only on the activity that we have to do something should be done to keep people engaged, and the second focus is on the learner.
Mm-hmm.
But nowhere the focus is on the learning of the people or the entity who is supposed to be teaching or creating these learning opportunities for the other. So in companies, like you said right now, who is taking a step back? And I don't even know, and that's my question to you, whether you see companies taking a step back or taking a pause and saying that hey, we are talking about a very new environment right now. We have seen purely bureaucratic environments. We have seen global culture entering into workspaces because of MNCs. And then we entered this space wherein we realized that employees do need attention and care from their employers and not just salary. So there's a learning curve that they're also going. But right now, do you witness in your observation and your experience that that pause opportunity happened for companies, that wait a minute, we just need to take a break, a pause, and see what we need to do?
Mm-hmm.
Or how is it?
That actually should happen regardless of the situation, right? Right now we are in a situation, last 6 months, all these collaboration software using Zoom and things like that, and trainings are happening there, and people should be doing that. But it should also happen for normal e-learning. It should also happen for normal classroom, and it doesn't. Most of the, and I have worked with and multiple
Who's
organizations.
and who's you have worked with?
Yes, I worked with multiple organizations. Even when I was in, when I in the job before I got into the corporate, I was in a service sector, right? I was in an e-learning company servicing various clients. Must have worked on 200 plus projects, like 200, 300 projects over 13 years in that company. And I've consulted with a lot of companies as well. And so I've been in all these different industries, all these different companies where we are creating learning products for them. And then we would hand it over, and that was it. We have no information on whether they were doing any sort of measurement of effectiveness or not. Right? Even when I was consulting and I was setting up learning effectiveness measurement superstructures, as it were, no? or rubrics for them, even then it was very difficult for us to actually get that data. Other than just the smiley sheet. Did you like the training? What did you like about it? Was the food good, etc., etc., which is really crap. But other than that, it was nobody was collecting. And in some companies, they would collect some data, and they were all piled up in a corner, printed.
Right.
Just keep piled. What's the point of collecting data if you're not going to do anything with it? Because the only thing I would say, even now today, 90% companies, the only thing that gets reported is that, hey, audience satisfaction is 4.8 out of 5. We have got a brilliant training program. Audience might be satisfied because you served very nice mutton
Yes,
for
could
lunch,
be.
or the teacher was, one of the teachers was really funny or something like that.
Or you had a good facility.
Yeah, it was beautiful. Like I was with TMTC, it was beautiful facility, right? It was like an oasis in the middle of Pune with more than 900 trees and turtles and owls on the trees, and it was beautiful. Just staying there for 10 days means that you get such a relaxation, off from your job, that you get give heights nice.
True.
Was the learning effective? Nobody does anything with the data. Most people do. Some companies try and do it to a certain extent. They have this entire model called Kirkpatrick's model, where you use to measure the effectiveness of learning. So level 1, level 2 is assessment, level 3 is when you find out 3 months later whether people have done, and so on. Level 5 is ROI. Nobody gets there.
Hmm.
So yeah, I mean, people don't do that. But now, because people are investing in technology, I hope to God somebody does, because whatever organization I work with next, I will insist, right, that we do this measurement. Otherwise, if somebody asks me 1 year down the line, I will find it very difficult to justify my own job.
Right.
Right? How do I prove that I'm adding value? Right? The only other solution that I can think of is,
Hmm.
if we are not in a position to measure to the extent that we should be measuring, the least we can do is coming back to good design.
Hmm.
If
Hmm.
my design is well thought out, if I design on the basis of target audience, the demographic, their current knowledge, the objectives, and I put all these things in my, put it together as a melange and create this design, create everything right, then I am mitigating the risk of the training bombing
Hmm.
from
Right.
an effectiveness perspective, right? So either I measure, or at the very least, for God's sake, I design well.
Right. Right. No, that's very true. I mean, internally, there's one thing that recently we also had a conversation wherein we do realize that there's not much data in the field that we are working in. And if we have to collect data, then first we have to make sure that we collect data, and second we have to make sure that it becomes information, and then we have to make sure that there are insights,
Mm.
and then eventually it will become knowledge.
Mm.
And until and unless we are going till the last point, it's actually futile to do anything that we are doing if you're not willing to go till the knowledge point. That's
Correct.
something that can be served to our audience or to everybody. So but now it becomes more difficult, right, Shantanu? We are not just talking about a completely virtual environment or a completely physical environment. This term phygital.
Mm.
How, if already curating learning programs was difficult, and to be honest, most of the programs are not even designed after doing a TNA. They are usually just executed in an umbrella mode, right?
I
So
hope, I hope, I hope not. I mean, I, I'm sure there are things that, fortunately, whenever I have designed something, I've never done anything without a TNA, but
no, but that's you, right? And I'm saying from my perspective, also being an OD practitioner,
right.
every time any intervention came, I'm trained to do a TNA first,
Mm.
or I'm trained to do a diagnosis first. And if somebody is not willing to do that, you don't have a base to begin with, right? But we'll keep that aside. Let's say somehow everybody knows what exactly needs to be created, and we end up creating it, right? How exactly should now organizations be looking at this digital space where the physical and the digital world is combining? And going back to the example that you said about students, and all of us are children, right? If you are not going to require my video as a mandatory thing, obviously I will switch it off and I can just be in my most casual self.
Mm.
And that's something that we are also observing, because we conduct a lot of e-learning sessions, and we have to literally call out people, and when they stop responding, we say that, hey, if you won't volunteer, we will pick. So there's something that needs to be going on. But how should organizations address this as a challenge?
See, first of all, the phygital bit is actually a luxury.
It
And
is.
let me explain why. because it assumes that there is a phygital space for learning which is available to everybody, right? So GE has a Crotonville, and L&T has a Lonavala, and all these people have this sprawling sort of, Aditya Birla has got its Gyanodaya, and Tata has its TMTC, but not many organizations have that. For them, the physical bit is one training room on the same floor at one corner, right? So the concept of phygital is essentially even combining the digital aspects with that particular training room. So a good example of phygital would be, say, having an intervention of something like a business simulation, a top sim, for example, where everybody sits in that training room, right? They're divided into 4 teams, as it were, given a business problem on their computer, right? And they have to, input their answers, discuss it, input their answers, etc. And there's an instructor view which is projected on the wall at the end of a cycle, and then you can all see how their respective companies have. That's an example of something we used to do, which is actually phygital. Because you needed to be there physically also, but it was a digital learning program. So that sort of midway is something which is very, very required. Earlier it was called blended, but blended is not specific enough because there are so many blends.
Yes.
Right. So so when we design learning in the future, this will play a part. That are we going to make use of our physical spaces also? Or do we need the kind of learning? I think a lot depends on the industry as well. So there are some industries which I don't see them really going physical again at all. Like take the example of retail.
Right.
Retail chain like Future Group or Reliance Retail or any of these companies, for example. It just doesn't make sense for them to do anything physically anymore, because the numbers we are talking about are legion, right? I mean, we're talking about 20,000, 30,000, 40,000, 1 lakh employees who are going to be trained in for to serve customers in Reliance Fresh.
True.
How are we ever going to train them physically? It's just not feasible. And especially after this sort of leap, at the coronavirus leap, it's never going to go back. There will be no physical training anymore. At best, there might be some localized point of sales physical training where the manager comes and takes a quick huddle and says that, this is how you use the scanner, etc.
The power training will happen.
Yeah, that's it. That's it. 5 minute, on specific problem solving training, as I call it, or just in time sort of training. Everything else is going to be e-learning, right? But on some industries, you will need by the very nature of the industry. If you take a company like Philips, which is selling clinical products, right? It's selling health tech products, like starting from a X-ray machine to a cath lab to a CET and PET scan. You are not going to be able to teach that virtually,
right?
Because the ability, the angle at which you hold the sonograph is equally important, as important as knowing which button to press.
True.
Knowing which button to press can be taught by e-learning, but the angle comes by practice, or the way you lower the cath lab to focus it, it comes by practice. So it's going to be a horses for courses, but the percentage of the digitalization is still going to be higher. While earlier, the entire cath lab training would be in a physical sort of lab, R&D lab, or wherever they would call all these people. Now, the theory bit is probably going to be done online, and the practical kind of component is going to be done physically. And the theory bit also is going to evolve, not just being text on screen. It is going to have stuff like maybe a virtual reality model that you can wear something and you actually do it in front of your computer or whatever. I don't know. It could be done on the PlayStation, for example, if required, developing training, 3D models, etc. All this, so it is not going to be simple e-learning. It's going to be high level 3, level 4 sort of e-learning where you get to know the machine very, very well, and then you get into the lab to learn how, some nuances of using that machine. And
Hmm.
again, there is learning available to you throughout your career, answering specific questions, because that is the just-in-time learning that I'm talking about.
Right.
At the point of using the machine, you suddenly have a question, something goes wrong. How do you do the troubleshooting? Is there a way? Can you open an app and say, I have this problem, what are the solutions to this? So
Hmm. Hmm.
it is no longer formal learning. It is ability to get the right information to be able to do your job at any point. This is what is known as learning in the flow of work,
Hmm. Hmm.
right?
Got it.
And this is the major evolution that is happening, because learning is no longer going to be an event.
Hmm.
It is going to be a part of your day-to-day life in your job, right? Because otherwise events are unsustainable, because events end, and events need to be maintained and updated, right? But if the maintenance and updates happen on a rolling basis, that makes it learning in the flow of work.
That's true. And anyway, human beings don't learn that easily.
They
You have
have
to
to,
unlearn something first.
and they have to be given those inputs on a regular basis, because otherwise we forget. I mean, i I don't remember, I hardly remember anything I learned during my graduation. Frankly, I did my graduation in English, by the way, and my master's in English. I hardly remember it. I had a couple of snatches of poems here and there. All the literary criticism has gone down the drain. I know, in fact, I now deride Derrida. But that's the reality. But if I were given certain inputs every day, a little note every day, then I would remember, right? And this is like humanities, who nobody wants anymore. But in sciences, or in sort of, technology, in job related things, it's even more important, because once you have that available to them, people, if they want to do their job well, will actually pull that learning. You don't even have to push it to them.
Right.
If they are confident that what they want to pull is going to be available to them, right? What happens when we go to Google? We are confident that we will get a answer to our search. Whatever the question might be, we are confident. So I go to Google with 100% certainty. I will get some information on what I'm looking for.
Google would know.
Right? Google would know, right? And Google is the one who is setting expectations for all of us in all other areas of operation as well. So for any organization, if you want your people to really get into the learning in the flow of work, you will have to compete with Google, right? Which makes the whole L&D, HR, leadership development, now it's become one big mass. These are all, you can't be a separate, HR cannot be a separate organization anymore. And to come to a larger point, based on the first question that you asked me, I'm coming back to it here. One of the major shifts in focus for HR and any of the, not just HR, supporting functions, HR, IT, supply chain, legal, regulatory, everything, is that they cannot afford to be separate organizations anymore. Have to be embedded in the business, because if they are not, they will never be able to serve business the way business needs to be served today, because
True.
the pace of change of business is so fast that HR cannot say the kind of the example you mentioned, that somebody says we need this training and therefore you create this training. What has happened here? Some manager or some CEO top down has heard about this training. Hey, I think we need this training for all our employees. L&D scrambles, और CEO ने बोला चलो एक training बनाते हैं.
Right.
Is the training actually required? Maybe yes, maybe no. But who is going to bell the cat? Who is going to walk up to the CEO and say, hey, is the training actually required? Nobody is going to do that. Why? Because HR is not empowered to ask that question.
True.
But if HR were embedded in the business, they would be empowered to ask that question. One of the things that we did in Philips, for example, that we created a new role called the learning business partner, and we could afford to do it in Philips because it was a large organization. So the
Hmm.
learning business partner was a separate entity and equally senior, maybe sometimes even more senior than the HRBP,
Hmm. Hmm.
right? So the learning business partner was empowered to ask these difficult questions to their own internal clients, saying that, okay, you have asked for this. On what basis, boss? Where's the data? Show me the data. Let's fill in this form together and figure out whether what you're asking for is valid or not,
Yeah.
whether you need training to solve this business problem or not, whether it's something else. And after that business needs analysis template was filled, would it come to learning consultants who would then start working on individual learning needs analysis for each of the business problems that has been with the learning business partner has identified, working with the business, right? But this is the way you have to do it, because otherwise HR, even talent acquisition for that matter, same problem. They will forever be running, scrambling to catch up with what the business wants, and then business will turn around and give them galis, just like they do give HR galis all the time. HR is never good enough, so HR gets hit from both sides.
HR is never good enough. I know what you're
Enough.
saying. It has the worst reputation when it comes to as a function.
Because that's because they don't have the empowerment. The only thing that they feel empowered to do is to make the rangolis. That's why you have the rangoli jokes. Right? Diwali mein rangoli banata, that's what HR does. You have all these jokes. Why? Because that's the one thing that HR can do without having to ask for permission from the CEO. Sir, rangoli banai. They don't have to do it. Other than that, everything else they have to ask permission from. Then what kind of HR partner are you if you have to ask permission, and if you can't anticipate what the business needs, or if you can't tell the business saying that, look, based on this, toss, you're going to collect all this data soon. Don't you need a senior data analyst to do that? Should I be hiring a data analyst? This is what HR and L&D should be doing. That don't you need this sort of training? That if you have a headcount, should we not train all our managers in basic data analysis, taking courses
Right.
on Udemy or something? This is what learning should be doing.
This is exactly what's not happening and becomes all the more difficult for, I would say, not soft skill, because I think behavior is as hard a skill in organizations and in professionals as it can be. But there are two challenges once again, right? If we have to see how it branches out, Shantanu. One is where we know that a skill, a knowledge can be felt, right? If you do not know how to open the bottle, and after I have spent time with you, now you can open the bottle, right? The result is so visible, right? That even if I'm not collecting it, or even if I try to collect it, I will be able to do it easily. There's a visible change that I see. It becomes more challenging when we talk about the behavioral or the mindset related learning now. With the digital space, what are the challenges that we should be? Because we actually are finding it difficult. I mean, the number of things that I have read in the past 6 months, even before COVID happened, and only because of the way our internal learnings have been happening as an organization. Everything from nudge-based learning to repetitive learning and micro lessons and everything, and yet the concreteness of the of you experiencing this learning is something which will be all the more difficult to capture, because I can't enter in your head and point out that, okay, this wiring has changed or this has changed. How do you see the behavioral side of learning in organizations getting impacted in the digital space or in the times to come that we are going to be looking at?
It's a difficult problem to solve, frankly.
I know.
It's a difficult problem to solve. There is no magic bullet, Pallavi. I think the best that we can do as HR, OD, learning professionals is to put together a set of steps that we have to follow for any intervention that we do, right? And that starts from before and goes up to even months after the intervention itself, right? And maybe multiple interventions, which I was talking about, the learning in the flow of work, not
Right.
even. So first part is, can we restructure, redesign the learning to make it multiple events
Hmm.
rather than one event or
Hmm.
one workshop?
Hmm.
Can
Hmm.
we design to do that? Working with the organization, customizing it to the requirement. Second is the customization part. Can I look at the target audience for this particular organization? A startup will have a very different demographic from a established sort of company. And from your perspective, I'm saying from the Ungender perspective, the kind of workshops and programs that you do, for example. Can I customize it? Change the examples, change the case studies, use even different people if required to the requirements of that particular target audience, which will increase effectiveness. Third is, what am I going to measure? I
Hmm.
need to have right upfront a set of parameters that I'm going to measure and have an agreement with the business that they will allow me, or at least provide me data which will allow me to measure that on an ongoing basis.
Hmm. Hmm.
Fourth is, we have to try and convince the business leaders that, look, we are in this together. You can't, who needs the training? Your people.
Hmm.
You're not doing Ungender or anybody else for that matter a favor by saying that I'm giving you this contract to do training for us.
Hmm.
You need this training. So you have to be all in. And when I say you have to be all in, it means that you also have to dedicate time and resources and not think, "Arey, workshop kara diya na. Now it's
Okay.
you guys have to do it." Right?
Right.
And what time and resources do we need? We need a couple of people inside your organization who can get access to information, anecdotes, data, take some interviews for us on a regular basis, talk to the managers of the people who have undergone the training, fill in the sheets that we give them diligently, and keep giving us this information so that we can prove to you whether there has been a behavioral change or not
Hmm. Hmm.
later on. Right? Fifth, at the first step, the objectives of the training need to be very, very clear. Right? Are we going to are we going to follow Bloom's or Mager's objective? But we need to make it measurable and very, very specific. Whether knowledge, comprehension, application, whatever. These
Right.
need to be clear. And fifth, there needs to be some sort of an assessment. Now, this assessment can be immediately after the training. It can be 3 months after the training. It can be 6 months after the training. The
Right.
assessment needs to be tied to those objectives to say whether people are doing. But through an assessment, there are two kinds of assessment. One is the assessment of the facts that you
Hmm.
do, which is your level 2 sort of assessment. And the other one is an assessment which is more, sort of scenario based in nature, which gives you indication of whether somebody's thinking has evolved or not. So that is a much more difficult assessment, that you give
Yes.
them a case, give them certain very close together sort of responses that they can do, and things like that. So all these tools together have
Hmm.
to work for you to be really able to, first of all, satisfy yourself that, hey, we are doing a good job, people is changing, and then
Right.
satisfy the company that, look, here is the proof that people's behavior, that means their wiring has changed, they're thinking differently. And it happens if you're a really good sort of extended, by the way, the extended doesn't mean that you have to give the same number of hours every month, and therefore your profitability goes down. You do your
Hmm.
micro learning thing, little, as I said, the trick is to convince them to be also all in with you.
Right.
So the
Right.
person who is your representative but is an employee of that company has to really believe in the cause that we are trying to measure behavioral change, and then do what you're saying because it's the mandate from the top, and
True.
not think of it as a burden. Yaar, ek aur kaam de diya.
That's true. That's true. But Shantanu, how do you see? Sorry, sorry. I think I cut you.
No,
Sorry.
no, no. I said these things have to work together. There are no, there's no blue pill to this.
There's
We
not.
can things like that. So they have to work together.
No, that's true. Two questions from here. I'll pose them one by one. First one is, considering right now as it is with companies going, completely, I would say, trying to figure out, going back to their drawing boards and understand how exactly the future of their own workplace, forget about the economy and everything else, but how are we going to survive? The survival instincts have kicked in, And even for companies where the survival instinct is, or the question is not there, a lot of changes are happening, right? And those changes are triggering two things. One, the individual need that required focus as an employee earlier, right? So companies also evolved from the learning that salary is not enough. Okay, you need job satisfaction. Okay, that also got created. Or you want to grow as a professional also. So then learning programs started, and then came the focus around how I feel in my workplace, right? And how my mental space is, how my emotional well-being is. This is deeply affected right now, and yet it is still the responsibility of the companies only to take care of, right? How should we right now be looking at this as a learning, and what are the extracts that companies can look forward to as they go about taking care of their employees?
I think companies um, will need to, at least the evolved companies who really want to do well, they want to do well by their employees, will need to understand what is happening psychologically with all these employees who are now basically working from home,
Right.
and not think of it as a, hey, you're working from home, what else do you need? घर से काम करने को मिल रहा है ना, right?
Yes.
Because working from home is not easy. You know, some people, you know, it's also a personality type. Some people love it. I mean, I know I have some of my colleagues who work from home even before all this. In you know, in MNCs, it's much easier to do that because they in Indian companies seem to think of it as a big favor. But in Philips, for example, many of my colleagues, they work from home all the time. They would come into office maybe one day, right, and they'd work from home, and nobody cared as long as the work was getting done. But there are people who need to come to work, who need to get out of the home,
Right.
right? And there's some people who want both, right? I'm, for example, one of those people who wants the flexibility of working from home without being forced to do it. Right. I mean, given a choice, I would spend some days in office and some days at home, frankly, or maybe I would spend Thursdays and Fridays at home and 3 days in office, maybe. So there are all these people, and companies need to understand that there are all these people. Some people really struggle to work from home, and these are the people organizations need to take care of, right? And again, not just think that it's you're working from, what else do you want? Which means that the role of the manager in an employee perspective becomes critical here. Remember, the manager might also need the same sort of
Absolutely. Who will take care of the person who is taking care of everyone, right? That's a
correct,
cycle.
correct. So right down from the CEO onwards, there has to be a culture of understanding and a culture of empathy that is there in a company, because without which it will not survive. See, what happens is, right now the economy is down, right? People are losing jobs. The number of people looking for jobs is more than the number of jobs available right now. Right now, a company can get away with not going that extra step to pamper or look after their employees, because hey, where will they go?
At least you have a job, that mindset is there.
Yeah, but these are cycles. The economy will look up, if not today,
Yes.
not next year, the year after that, and then again there'll be jobs available. And then that's the time that you need this. If these employees are festering with resentment for 2 years because they have been working from home and they are being ignored for promotions or things because you're not there in front of the manager every day, then they leave the first opportunity they get.
True.
So every manager, perhaps a little bit of a carrot and stick, every manager needs to be given a KRA to take care of people who report to him, right? It could mean something as simple as a daily 5-minute call, or or every twice a week, or something like that. Understanding, ask them what is the thing, and this has to be a company culture, right? This is something that you can't teach the company, empathy. Either a company has it or it doesn't, right? Either some very big companies get away with not having empathy because that is their culture. People will still join them because, but people will never, be loyal to them beyond a certain point,
That's
beyond the
true.
money, right? But if you want people to stay on, this has to come down from the top, this whole empathy bit. So the role of the manager becomes very important, the manager's manager, and so on. Learning in a way is part of it. So to facilitate this learning bit, so that the employee also feels that I'm not just doing my job, I'm also increasing my skills or increasing my value to the company in some way, there have to be enough learning opportunities provided to them, maybe with the help of sponsored courses, skills, etc. online. It could be a Udemy, it could be a Coursera, whatever. Enough access, get a learning experience platform, make them aggregate content that people can take. But very importantly, I mean, coming back to the empathy bit, I think every manager needs to be trained in coaching, right? Because I can talk to people, but I might be missing some cues because I'm not, it's like being a psychiatrist. I can also talk to people, but I'm not a psychiatrist. I don't have the tools, I don't have the training, right?
True.
Or even a psychologist for that matter. I'm not one. Just being able to empathetically talk to people doesn't mean that I'm able to catch all the nuances. But if I'm trained in certain coaching techniques, if I'm trained to ask the right questions, then what I'm doing is ensuring that at least the person I'm talking to feels that I am asking the right questions.
True.
I'm trying to understand genuinely what that person is feeling. It could be just a chat sometimes. So managers need to be coaches as part of their jobs, even more now that a lot of the jobs are going to go online. Because earlier you meet them every day, right? You get to see them, you backslap, you have a smoke together, you have chai together. All that matters, man. We are social people. I miss meeting my friends so much. I can't tell you, I miss having the Saturday night, drinking sessions and all. Even now, our 3 families get together. I really miss it, right? And we tried Zoom calls, and it's not the same thing. I mean, we even, being Bengali and all, we always, start to, or even the non-Bengali, we start to sing, right? We used to have this karaoke parties, so we tried to sing on Zoom.
I love all my Bengali friends for this reason. They love singing, and they're amazing musicians also. But yes.
We tried to sing on Zoom and all. I mean, but it's not the same thing. And so beyond the point, we had a few, petered out. We'll probably have used, from once a week, now we are having it once a month. It's not the same. And even in the workplace, the whole thing of interaction, walking up to somebody, can you show me how to do this change? The colleagues say, yeah, just do this. Okay, you can't do that very simply anymore. Now you have to ping somebody, hey, do you have 5 minutes? I have a question to ask you. Okay. Oh, sorry, in a call, I'll ping you when I'm free. It's not the same thing, man.
That's a way of life for us at Ungender. We have always been a remote working team.
Yes, but
we're
you
trying to
understand what I'm saying, right? Because if you have to, the kind of, at the very least, any company will need to have at least periodic physical meetups.
True.
So that, it's not just on a screen. I mean, if you're on a screen, if I'm working with Ungender and I'm talking to you like this for 1 year, I will think that the only place you have is that curtain behind you with those, post-its on the wall, and you will think that I have this ridiculous, yellow and green cupboard behind me. That's all I have, and this is my world.
That's why Zoom came up with backgrounds.
Background, yeah, and for that also you need a black background for them to work, because otherwise
I didn't know that.
it's otherwise it's just weird. I tried doing that. If you see behind me, it's yellow and green, right?
Right.
So the green bits took the Zoom background, the yellow bits remained.
Oh wow, okay.
Suddenly I was half on the beach and half in front of a cupboard. Yeah. You need a dark background for that.
See, I learned something new today. Amidst other so many important things. But these are funny times, Shantanu, right? Because when we do these conversations, and ours is not a technical work, right? So I'll speak purely from the experience that we have been having. Either we're talking to HRs, or we're talking to legal, or we're talking to DNI heads, right? And all the conversations revolve around how employees conduct with each other, and biases and perceptions flowing in our verbal and non-verbal communications, how it creates hostile environment for employees. And that's a major part of how any company evolves,
Mhm.
right? Why diversity is important, and how you should build a culture of inclusion. Now, earlier, making sure that there's a post somewhere, a wall somewhere where diverse group of people have posed together, and that means that you are creating the image of the diversity that you have. You will celebrate these festivals, for different people from different religion
Mhm.
and different belief system, to get everyone to feel that, hey, you are also important, and you're also important. If Diwali is important, Eid is also important. These are the this is how creating a culture or curating a culture
Mhm.
has been understood, more in visual and physical aspects of the office that we talk about, right? That's why the colors of the walls are important and plants are important. All that has been taken away, right?
Correct.
um, how do you create a culture when there is no physical space? One of the biggest lesson from today's time, and I think for the next 5 years or 10 years, because we still do not know how long it is going to be and how much impact it is going to have. The data is not ready to be studied.
Mhm.
How do you create a culture? And this is also the responsibility of the leaders. This is something that they have to learn
Right.
when there is no office and
Right.
no walls to paint.
I, it's a it's going to be, I think, the single most difficult thing to do
Hmm.
over the next couple of years, if we have to go on a complete leap. On the other hand, maybe we will come up with something which is completely different from the way we circumscribe culture today.
Hmm.
What do we mean by culture? You define the culture as, having certain celebrating festivals, etc., etc.
No, I didn't define it. I'm saying that's how majority of
That's how
corporates have understood it.
that's how it's done currently. Maybe we'll have a new definition of what culture means. Maybe the whole concept of celebrating a festival as part of the culture will be superseded by the concept of maybe celebrating a company milestone, for example,
Hmm.
or where everybody gets together. Maybe it's a town hall. That's a culture. Maybe the culture is having, just like learning has turned to micro learning, maybe culture is to have micro celebrations
Hmm.
at a project group level, right?
Right.
Maybe it means more involvement, more active involvement of the CXOs in talking to their teams regularly on
Hmm.
it, right? Uh, Congratulating them, going online, coming to them, talking one-on-one, managers talking one-on-one. Maybe that's how, that's what will work. There are no answers right now, Pallavi. I mean, I don't have an answer for you. That's what I'm
I understand.
it's too early to see what will work. I mean, I can probably rattle off some possible prescriptions, but that would be really stupid because I don't have any basis for those. It will be just conjecture.
No,
On
I understand. So let me rephrase the question then, if I may. Is that okay? Can I
Yeah,
rephrase?
sure, sure, sure.
Okay. If we have to identify three things,
Hmm.
for a company to be able to keep communicating that you're important, you will grow, and we care for you,
Mhm.
right? If these three things are to be done in the virtual environment that all of us are dealing with, any tips from your end that you think and you believe should be incorporated? Like, for example, health insurance has become a mandatory thing, not just because it is a mandate from the government now, but also because of the times that we are living in. And now companies have become very conscious about providing health insurance. But then, how about taking the next step? Because for people like us, if you have health insurance but it's not inclusive of all genders, then it doesn't count, right? So
Right,
it's still
right.
rejected. And that's why asking you that from an evolving organization perspective, which has to continue learning because it's a non-negotiable thing. You
Correct.
cannot say I will not learn, right? Let the times pass. Keeping the importance, care, and growth of the talent that they are keeping in their company and they want to continue keeping. What are the few things that they should be keeping in mind?
So since you asked for three things, I would say that the three things are: one, greater transparency, and I'll talk about it a little bit. Uh, the second one is HR policies that
Mm-hmm.
actually matter,
Mm-hmm.
right? And the third one is the uh, the ability to provide the employees opportunity to learn continuously and
Hmm.
improve. So when I talk about greater transparency, you are already in a situation where transparency seems to have reduced because you're home. So to obviate that, the company will have to be very, very open about its policies, about appraisals, for example. Uh,
Hmm.
Try to figure out some way of combining the HRIS with the learning management system so that you can understand why people are getting rated in a certain way.
Hmm.
As you know, about salary bands, etc. If you are very, very transparent, then people have, you know, either people will complain, hey, everybody knows my salary
Right.
at the beginning, but eventually people will know, right? And therefore they'll think that why does this guy get more than me because he's in different band, more experience, whatever.
True.
So if there is a band based on experience, make it transparent,
Right.
right? If there is a certain percentage that everybody in the company is going to get at a basic, you know, if you get rated 3, then everybody gets 8%, then everybody gets 8%.
True. Hmm.
So the more transparent you are, the more trust and the more comfortable the employee feels. That's number one. Second is the policies that you talked about. Think
Hmm.
of something very simple. One of the things that uh, I asked companies before I joined, because of my particular circumstances, is that are my parents covered in your health insurance?
Hmm. Okay.
Right? For me, it's a big thing because my parents are very at risk and they're old, and obviously nobody's going to give them insurance anymore, right, at this age. And because I had insurance, my mother, I could afford my mother's cancer treatment a few years back. Uh,
Hmm.
it's a real thing for me. For people in my age, many of us having aging and sick parents, it's a big thing if a company says suddenly, hey, we know insurance is normally restricted to your wife and children, but we're also with the if you give a certain amount of premium yourself, we are also going to include your parents,
Hmm.
and the previous thing will not be considered while the insurance. It's a big
Hmm.
This is known as an employee friendly sort of HR policy. It involves a cost, yes,
Yeah.
but it is mitigated by the fact this employee is likely to be more loyal to you and not jump to another company who does not have that parental insurance.
True.
This
Hmm.
will work till the time there are companies who don't provide that same perk,
Hmm.
right? So policies have to evolve accordingly.
True.
If everybody is now providing insurance, medical insurance for parents, then you have to think, what can I give them?
Hmm.
What can I provide that others don't? What is going to make them happy? Have that, do that survey, anonymous survey. Ask people, what would you like more from this company?
Hmm. Hmm.
And some of them will be quite ridiculous claims, but there'll be many, many good ideas and crowdsource that information, because we do not talk to the employees enough. We think we know what is best for them.
Right. Right.
Crowdsource that information. What are the top 10 things that you want? Ask everybody to fill in a particular survey. Get an external agency to do that, and then see what is plausible and what is practical to implement on that, and give that transparency to the employees. Coming back to my first point, this is what we did. These were the top 10. This is not practical, not practical, not practical, because this is entail 3 million a year, which we don't. But this is practical, and therefore we're implementing this.
Right. Right.
So, and the third is learning. Give them opportunities to learn. Give them opportunities to grow. Okay, what do you need to learn to be able to fill the role of your manager?
Hmm.
Right? What do you need to you know, are you at a competency level? Are you at a beginner or an advanced level? What do you need to learn to be able to get into an expert level? And what happens? What is the incentive for you to get into expert level? If I get into an expert level in 3 or more competencies, then I get an award from the management. It could be a cash award,
True, true.
right? These are things that will keep an employee happy on a rolling basis. But these are, again, nothing is an event. HR, OD has to think about this. L&D, they have to think about it together as a group and keep thinking about this, and so that they also earn their pay.
No, no, that's true. Event versus experience.
Yes.
Don't there's, I think there's a constant battle that HR keeps fighting on how to actually make an experience out of it. But as you mentioned, somewhere in the middle of this, there's no empowerment to be able to take that decision, because mostly HR is not seen as a investment, you know, it's seen more as a cost. And
L&D even less so. L&D is a subset of HR. So imagine the first thing that companies do
getting
is
a very
that
small
cut out,
portion.
cut out training. Training band karo. That's the first thing that the people do, because and because they don't believe in the effectiveness of training. Many companies, when I was at this company called Tata Interviews, where I was 13 years, the e-learning company, my CEO was very blunt. He did not believe in behavioral training.
Hmm.
He did not. So people just go out and have a good time and drink in the evening. Nothing happens. I would rather send people to learn Photoshop because that's required for my business. Right? Why did he get that impression? Because that's what he has seen. That's the kind of training that he has seen that people do. They do not really apply anything, and because there was no way to measure whether it was effective or not, we did not do that measurement, right? So the people who conducted the training were not able to convince, just like HR was not able to convince the CEO that this is actually any use.
Got it. No, it's a very difficult thing. I mean, sometimes we, of course, interact mainly with HRs, and we see the struggle that they are going through also. And we see the success, the emotion of success on their face every time they're able to get something cleared out as well. And it is a difficult thing if I put myself in their shoes. You know what I just did? I wrote the topic of our next conversation. Because today I've already taken the time beyond, what I had blogged with you, Shantanu, and I apologize for this.
No problem.
मैं भी बह जाती हूँ बीच बीच में. I also have to put my 2 cents across. But I can't thank you enough for letting me dig deeper and deeper on this aspect of how organizations learn,
Mm-hmm.
from them learning to the leaders to managers to individual learning, from a physical space to online space, how learning has evolved. There's so much that we have covered.
Yes.
And when you were just ending that last note of yours, and you said the importance of behavioral learning, and that is what I'm going to request you to join me on the next conversation, as and when you have time
Sure.
at your end, because I don't think organizations understand how important it is when we talk about the behavioral side of learning.
Yes, and organizations that do always succeed, right? It's not that people who don't not succeed, but the people who do have behavioral learning properly always succeed. And the others, they can have short-term gains, but that's probably because they don't want employees to stay beyond a certain point, and they want that constant churn also. That's also a belief system in some companies.
True, true.
But yeah, I think behavioral training is absolutely imperative, and without which the organization is just a soulless blood-sucking vampire. What really separates a good organization from just a company to work for.
Oh, I have to write that also down. Anyway, so thank you, Shantanu, for everything today. Had an amazing conversation with you, and can't wait till our next conversation where we'll go
Sure.
and talk about behavioral learning and its importance.
Definitely. Thanks for having me. And I think you guys are doing, I mean, I know a little bit through Ritu and the tweets and all. I think you guys are doing a great job there. So it's a pleasure always to be able to help, of course.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye.